My name is Taylor Koo, and today I'm going to be going over the speech sounds in Spanish. So let's take a look. First, let's go over a little bit of background on the Spanish language. So it is a Romance language, which just means that it is one of the Latin languages. It descended directly from Vulgar Latin, and it's also an Indo-European language family. It is native to northern uh, India, most of Europe, and the Iranian Plateau, as well as Sri Lanka, the Maldives, parts of Central Asia, and Armenia. And then most of the native speakers of Spanish are from Spain and the Americas. And there's 483 million native speakers globally, but the total number of Spanish speakers is closer to 558 million, and that's going to be including second language speakers. Spanish is also the second most spoken native language in the world. It's second only to Mandarin, and it's the fourth most spoken language overall. And then Mexico has the largest population of native Spanish speakers. So let's take a look at some of the Spanish grammar. Hopefully, I'm not triggering too many people because I'm assuming that, like me, a lot of us took Spanish living here in California. And I know that it was a little bit overwhelming, at least for me, to learn all the different conjugations. And when I was researching for this project and I saw that there are about 50 conjugated forms of each verb, I was like, oh, okay, no wonder I was struggling with this a little bit. But Spanish is a fusional language. It's an inflected language. It uses single inflectual morphemes to denote multiple grammatical and semantic features. The noun and adjective systems have two genders, both masculine and feminine, and two numbers, so it can either be singular or plural. It's also conjugated for past, present, future tenses, and then everywhere in between, as well as for formality and familiarity. It is a right branching language, and modifying constituents follow the head words typically. It's also an SVO language, a subject verb object language, but it can vary. So let's take a look at some of the foreign sounds, which are going to be the sounds that occur in Spanish and not in English. I found this demonstrative that clearly shows the unique characters, or I'm sorry, the unique sounds for each of the languages, as well as some of the crossover. So the first one we're going to cover today is the ñ sound, and it represents the enya. So I think of it as kind of like a, an NYA in English, or it's also similar to the sound ni in onion, onion. Um, it's a voiced palatal nasal consonant, which is produced by raising the middle or back of your tongue to the hard palate, and then air is going to flow through the nose while you're making this sound. And a couple examples would be sueño, which means sleep, or the word año, which is year in Spanish. So it's different from the N in English. You get a little, your tongue's a little further back in your mouth. And then the next sound that I wanted to cover is the R sound. It's that rolling R that everyone loved in Spanish. And it's a single trill, or it can be longer, and it's stronger than any R sound that we have in English. So it's pronounced like the r at the start of a word and also after an L, N, or S. And for this pronunciation or this sound, the place of the articulation, it could be dental, alveolar, or post-alveolar, so behind the ridge. And the sound is voiced, so the vocal cords are vibrating, and it's an oral consonant, so the air is only escaping through your mouth when you're making this sound, and that airstream is directed along the center of the tongue. Then the next sound is the sound, and it's kind of a guttural sound. It's the pronunciation of the Spanish J, and it's only it's in front of certain vowels, and you hear it more in Castilian Spanish. It's voiceless uvular, and it occurs at the middle or back of the soft palate. Um, and then a voiceless uvular fricative is common in some parts of Spain. Other regions might use a voiceless velar fricative, or a voiceless glottal fricative. So it is kind of dependent upon region and what type of Spanish you're speaking or what part of the world you're in. You might see a few differences in that. But an example of that sound would be jamon for ham, or jota, and jota is the letter J in Spanish. So you're kind of, I don't want to say you're kind of coughing something up, but it's coming from lowering your throat, expelling out that sound for jamon or jota. Uh, and then the last sound that I wanted to cover is the ya sound. And so this one is it's interesting. So it's the pronunciation of the double L, and it's distinguished from the yeah sound, which is very similar, but only in some areas. And so this sound, it's similar to the yeah, like in million, yeah, that sound. And so it's a voiced palatal lateral approximant. But at this point, the majority of speakers have lost the lateral distinction and have merged it, um, have merged the two together, and it's called a yesmo. And 90% of speakers have adopted the yesmo. So you're going to hear that more traditionally. And an example of that is going to be calle for street. It's that yeah, the calle, and then a ya for she. Um, and it's just kind of a light yeah sound. All right. And then we're going to take a look at a few other variations on the next slide. So we're going to take a look now at allophonic variations. So there's a few letters in the Spanish language that have some distinctions that make it different from the English pronunciation, even though there are a few overlaps. So in English, the sounds ba, da, nga are typically pronounced as plosives, also known as stops. And that's when a complete stoppage of the airflow is followed by a burst of air. So, for example, it would be like in the word bat or dog or go, those sharp, short sounds. But in Spanish, the sounds for bataca can be produced or can be pronounced as fricatives or approximants, particularly when they're between vowels or after certain other consonants. So that just means that the airflow isn't completely stopped, like in the plosive, but instead it's partially restricted, and the resulting sound is going to be softer. So instead of the plosive ba, you're going to see a fricative ba. So it's almost sounds like a V sound in English. So an example of that is going to be hablar, which means to speak, as opposed to bueno, which means good. And then we see it for the da sound. So an explosive da would be andar. Um, that's sharp sound. And then the approximate is going to be cada. So it's more, or which means each, but it's softer, that sound. And then uh, the last one is going to be the ga or yeah. So for this one, it's the first one, it has that plosive, the pause after the nasal consonant, and then the second one is going to be the approximate. Um, so if we hear the g in Gloria versus the aga, it's in which means do or to make, it's going to be a softer, um, slower, more sustainable release as opposed to that shorter burst like sound. So just slight variations for those three letters that kind of changed how those sounds are. And then finally, I have my works cited, and hopefully you guys found that interesting and learned a little bit about the differentiations of the Spanish sounds.